Recording in progress.
Hello, if we could ask everybody to put their microphones on mute, please. Okay, I just went ahead and muted everybody. Just allowing a few additional people in the room. Thank you, everybody. My name is Justin Bannister. I'm the Associate Vice President for Marketing and Communications at New Mexico State University. We have a few individuals here today with us. We have NMSU Chancellor Dan Arvizu. We've got Mario Mocha, who is our Director of University Athletics. We also have Ann Goodman, who is NMSU's Dean of Students. Each of them will have some opening remarks. Then we will open it up to questions. Please use the raise hand feature on your screen and wait until you're recognized. When you are recognized, please state your name and what your media affiliation is. Thanks. I'll turn it over to you, Chancellor.
Thank you, Justin. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending today's press conference. The purpose of this press conference from our perspective is to address the greater NMSU community and really to address questions that have been raised about how the university is responding to the extremely tragic and unfortunate events of last weekend. As you know, there is still an ongoing investigation, and many of the pertinent facts are not yet known and are still being developed and understood. So we're not going to be able to speak with much specificity on the actual events that occurred, and primarily because they're still under investigation. But we can talk about process. We can talk about what our protocols are, how we do things, what we have, actions we've already taken, and a little bit about what we view as our potential next steps. So let me start. Again, I want to just give a few high-level comments about how the university views this event. And then I would like to turn it over to Athletic Director Mario Mocha and also Dean of Students, Dr. Ann Goodman, who will provide additional opening comments. And then from that point, we will all stand for questions. So let me say, the first thing I want to say is the events of last week are truly tragic. This should never happen anywhere, let alone on a university campus, and let alone between university students. It is extremely unfortunate, disappointing, and frustrating in a lot of different ways, because we try in so many different ways to make sure that our environment for learning is healthy, safe, and sustainable over the long run. What I think, recognizing this and trying to put it into some level of context, those events that happened on Friday night and even some of the things that led up to those events that happened on Friday night, unfortunately, I think expose some of the serious underbelly of the challenges that are facing society just in general. It's not lost on any of us, of all of the events of just the past 10 days in terms of gun violence and social ills and a variety of other things that are plaguing our nation and our society. Again, never should happen on a university campus, and the university environment, and sometimes with rivalries between institutions, exacerbate what otherwise is social anxiety in ways that we just simply have not seen before. And so in the context of that rivalry, and especially as it has gained a bit more of a confrontational sort of of tone to it over the past few seasons, President Stokes and I met. We've talked at great length a number of times since last week, and we are both committed to lowering the temperature regarding our rivalry part of this other broader context. And in that vein, yesterday we announced that we would suspend play of the two rivalry games that we have on an annual basis between NMSU and UNM, and to give us an opportunity to really reevaluate kind of how these events ought to take place. That will be for men's basketball only. Before I turn it over to Mario and Ann, I also wanted to reassure Aggie Nation that the state of the university is still very positive, very sound. That I gave a State of the University address a couple of weeks ago. And in that address, talked about all the great things that are going on, some of the things to look forward to. None of that's changed. We still have great aspirations, still very positive. These tragic events obviously put a damper, put a pall on that positivity. But we still have 21,000 students that are actively working on their education and working hard and doing the things that they're supposed to do. So I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we've got a very robust student population, not just on our main campus, but also in our branch campuses. And they're doing great work. I know we are very proud of our student athletes in so many different ways. So we don't want these kinds of events to cast too negative an umbrella over the entire university's activities, because I think it would be unfair to do that. On the other hand, we are taking these events extremely seriously, and we are looking at everything we can and should be able to do to avoid these kinds of things in the future. And we will be working hard as we learn more things to take the necessary steps required by information that we learn. So I just want to say, in closing with my opening remarks here, our campus is safe. Our processes are being evaluated to avoid these kinds of activities and these kinds of events in the future. And we will take appropriate action on things as information is revealed, where essentially we need to make some corrections, and we will do so. We're committed to do that. So with that, let me just turn it over to Mario Mocha. And Mario, why don't you make a few opening comments, turn it over to Ann, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Appreciate everybody joining this. I'll open with a kind of a rare prepared statement, and then I know we'll take questions. But when I received the phone call about the events very, very early on Saturday morning when I was in Columbia, Missouri for our football game, I was shocked. I was sad to learn of the details and very disappointed. You know, with regard to our men's basketball student athlete, Michael Peak, athletics was aware of an altercation with him and some other individuals at the October 15th football game between New Mexico State and the University of New Mexico. And discipline measures were taken at that time after the event. I spoke to Mike today, and while privacy matters concerning his health and our conversation was private, he did want me to know that our coaches did everything they could, and for him to lead with that speaks volumes with what that man, young man, has in front of him at the moment. Now, you know, certainly a tragic episode of bad judgment can paint the entire program in a negative light in some of the public's eye. However, I'd like to remind everybody of our three core values in athletics that we preach all the time: academic integrity, social responsibility, competitive intensity. Our 16 teams and 400 student athletes, that includes men's basketball, have recorded a 3.0 plus GPA for 17 years. That's 34 consecutive semesters. Pre-pandemic, those same 400 student athletes, including men's basketball program, participated in over 6,000 hours of community service annually. And each team is assigned to a charitable organization. And obviously, we've won several conference championships and NCAA tournament appearances. So for the vast majority, they're living up to those three core values, all 16 teams, 10 women's teams, 6 men's, and 400 student athletes. So while, you know, this incident has cast a negative light on intercollegiate athletics, I'd suggest it's unfair to paint all of our student athletes, our entire student athlete population and department, with that same brush.
Thank you, Mario. Ann?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Chancellor. Thank you, Mario. I'm here to provide a little bit of context with regards to expectations and how we work with our students overall, from a values perspective and what we expect of our students. As you know, New Mexico State University is committed to a set of core values. Athletics has its own set of core values, and we speak to our students when they are admitted about the expectations that we have of our students. And that includes the assumption that they're going to seek out excellence in all that they do, serve as leaders. Accountability is a significant part of that set of core values, diversity and inclusion, and service to our community. All of these things are expected of all of our students, not just student athletes. So when I heard about this incident also on Saturday, I was shocked and also concerned about what had occurred and what may have prompted that. We work very closely with all of our partners on campus whenever there are incidents involving students and visitors. We have a good working relationship with those partners and work very closely with our law enforcement friends. And so when an incident occurs, we are notified, and then we follow a process that's dictated by our administrative rules and process. That process falls to me to make sure that that my team is following that, and that we're providing students the opportunity to learn from what has happened, but also to hold them to the expectations that NMSU has. So we have a set of standards that can be found. Those are shared with our students when they come to school. But those processes are founded in the basic fundamental fairness functions that you see play out in both the civil and criminal court process. Sometimes they can be quite lengthy, in particular investigations. Investigations, while we can go a little bit faster, still we want to be thorough and make sure that we have all the information before we put a student through a conduct process. So I can speak to those processes. Again, student conduct records are a part of a student's educational record, which is covered by the federal law, or FERPA, the Family Rights and Privacy Act. And so I'm sure many of you understand that student conduct and disciplinary records can't be shared without a student's consent. And so I can't speak to individual conduct matters, but I can certainly stand for questions with regards to process. So thank you.
Thanks, Ann. Much appreciated. As I mentioned at the front end, we have got a number of folks here in the room. So we will take questions from the media. If you would use the raise hand function and wait until you're called upon. When you are, please state your name and what media outlet you represent. Tommy Lopez, you can go first.
Hi, thank you guys for doing this. We wanted to ask if Mike Peak is still on the team, is still a New Mexico State University student. And then secondly, if a student athlete were to have a gun on a trip, such as that one, an athletic trip, what rules would that student be breaking?
And this might be a good one for you.
Can we ask Tommy what organization he's from? I think he missed that part of the instructions.
I'm a reporter with KOB.
Thank you.
So the first part of the question, I'm not sure I recall specifically. So if I have to go back and speak through that, I'm happy to do that. But essentially, we have a number of student conduct code. We have some stated conduct code standards, and in particular, weapons. Weapons are not allowed on campus. They're also not allowed as a part of any kind of a sponsored or organized event that involves New Mexico State University. And so that would be one of the first policies that we would address in that context. It would not matter if they are a student athlete or not. If a student is involved in a sponsored organization and the event, then they would be held to those same standards.
Did that answer everything for you, Tommy?
It did answer the second question. The first was, is Mike Peak still on the men's basketball team? Is he still a New Mexico State University student?
And
do you want to mention mention what you can about the students?
I can speak to the fact that FERPA does allow me to provide an update with regards to enrollment status. He's still currently enrolled. And I do not know the status of his membership on the men's basketball team.
Yeah, I think we're getting into semantics. Yes, certainly Mike is still on the team. He's on the roster. And I think that's probably all I'll say at the present
That's all we can say at this point, yeah.
Thank you. Colin Deaver? No, we can't hear you, Colin.
You're on mute, Colin.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah. So for Mario, I'm Colin Deaver with KTSM in El Paso. For Mario, obviously this happens on Saturday. The basketball team is leaving for Las Vegas today to play on Friday. Given everything that has transpired in the last 4 or 5 days, Mike is still hospitalized. Why did you guys feel like it was still okay to send them to Las Vegas to play in the tournament as opposed to postponing?
Yeah, I think a couple of things, Colin. So to recapture your question, why did we think it was okay to, continue playing basketball? I think, first of all, the vast majority of team was doing what they were supposed to do at the time. And, when we collectively had a discussion about this, a return to some normalcy for the vast majority of those student athletes is something that we felt was important to do. So that's why the decision was made that, we would honor our commitment in that MTE in the Orleans, in Las Vegas.
I guess as a follow-up, was there discussions to not go? I don't mean to be flippant here, but there was obviously some problems in Albuquerque, and then sending a team to Las Vegas. I mean, certainly there's some outward perceptions of what Las Vegas is. I mean, was there discussions about not going?
I think, am I on here? Yeah, Colin. So certainly when we had university discussions, we discussed a whole litany of things. One was the next athletic contest, which happens to be this tournament. And while certainly I wish it was in a different city, that just happens to where it be. So, we certainly discussed the location of this tournament not being our desired one. However, at the end of the day, the decision was made that, it was important for our basketball team to resume some normalcy as soon as possible.
Thanks, Colin. Rachel Phillips, and again, reminder for everybody, please state your name and your media affiliation.
Hey, Mario, Rachel Phillips with Channel 7 in El Paso. Two-part question here. In regards to Greg Heyer, where does he stand with the team? Is he still head coach? Has there been any disciplinary action taken against him and his role?
Okay. Certainly, Greg Heyer is still our head coach. As I've said a few times, I don't comment on personnel, decisions. However, I know that's very vague. I will let you know that the coaching staff on that Friday night, the kind of sequence of events is we had a team dinner. We watched film from 10:30 to 11:30, and we did bed checks at 11:45. And we even was ensured that we had a coach in the lobby. So, from that standpoint, I think the coaching staff and Greg Heyer certainly fulfilled his obligations of what we expect to, ensure the student athletes are, tucked away for the evening. So I think that's where you're going with that question, but he still is the men's basketball coach, yes.
And just second question from me, in the Q&A, it was mentioned that Peak wasn't the only student that broke curfew. How many others broke curfew, and was that to help Peak, or were they also out on their own accord?
Well, I'll defer to Justin. I think you're now kind of getting into what might be part of an investigation, even if the student athletes may not have a part in that. It's still part of that. So, Justin, I don't.
Yeah, I agree.
We can answer that question.
Yeah, I agree. We can disclose what we've already disclosed. There were multiple student athletes out of their room that evening. Beyond that, we can't really speak publicly at this time.
I guess just a quick follow-up, and I understand if you can't answer it. If they're not in Vegas, does that mean that they are involved in the investigation, or is every player expected to be in Vegas?
Every player is expected to be in Las Vegas, except obviously Mike Peak.
Thank you.
I see Will. I don't see a last name. Will, could you identify yourself and your media affiliation?
Will Weber.
Hey, Justin, sorry about that. This is Will Heron with ABC7
Hi, Will.
in El Paso, Texas. How are you guys?
Thank you.
Okay, my question more kind of goes to Chancellor Vizu regarding the gun policy and such. Something that I'm curious about is there is a policy of not having guns on campus. Apparently, there are guns on campus. Student athletes apparently have guns. How are you going to make sure that these athletes do not have guns and that the students don't have guns and they don't have to worry about guns being around them, or I hate to say being shot? I mean, what are we doing about this gun situation?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. Clearly, we have a very strict policy of no guns on campus, and that will continue to be looked at very carefully and enforced to the maximum degree possible. So, I guess that's true at UNM, similar to it is at NMSU. You simply cannot bring guns on campus, and if you do, you're subject to disciplinary action. And the dean of students, once we learn about that, can take that action unilaterally without any questions to it. Doesn't matter which student it is. Doesn't matter athletes or anything else. I think relative to athletes, though, we do have some protocols that at least are trying to get at security and safety, and we'll just need to redouble our efforts on some of those. I know that when we go on flights to different places, there's a TSA like security a process that you go through and to ensure that you don't have explosives or any kind of contraband of any that we don't allow. So in that context, when you have games that you just get on a bus, you don't have the same level of rigor, and that happens at least in football and basketball. It happens twice a year with UNM and UTEP. So we can do more to essentially police, if you will, the honor code, because that's kind of what we've been doing. Is we have honor code, and obviously violation of the student conduct code gets you disciplinary action immediately. So we'll tighten those things up and look more carefully at them. It may be that for some of our events we need to have metal detectors and those kinds of things instead of just the kind of security services that we presently provide. We will evaluate all of those things and determine what it is that we actually do need to do in order to keep our campus safe. Mario, you want to talk a little bit about the protocols with athletics, because I think that was also part of the question.
Yeah, I think Will used plural. I mean, it's one student athlete that we're aware of. And yes, just to reinforce what the chancellor said, at New Mexico State, the vast majority of our travel are flights, but obviously UTEP and UNM are bus trips. We had never, checked bags on the buses. And however, we have discussed that and put some things in place that going forward, when we have trips like this, that will take place.
If I may follow up real quick with a question, what about the weapons that are on campus now that maybe you don't know about? Are you going to try to search some of the areas, search some of the dorms and stuff like that? I don't want that to happen, but what do you think about weapons that may still be on campus?
Will, actually, and sorry, Chancellor, I'll let you respond if you'd like. I wanted to mention to Will, the university, all universities have to report annually. It's a part of a Clery report that's posted on our website. And I'll let you know that in 2021, 0 arrests were made involving weapons. In 2020, 1 arrest was made involving weapons. And in 2019, 3 arrests were made involving weapons. So I believe that should put it into kind of perspective to what kind of campus we have when it comes to safety.
Thank you, Justin.
Yeah, that's sufficient. Thank you, Justin.
Okay, thanks, Will. Jason, you're up next.
Yeah, Mario, I was wondering if you could
Jason, go ahead and let everybody know where you're from, please.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm with the Sun News in Las Cruces. Mario, how would you characterize the competency or leadership style so far of Coach Heyer at the top of the basketball program? From the outside, it seems like there's been some incidents leading up to and even like before the season even started. And did Coach Heyer lay out any changes that he would make? And if so, I don't know if you can share any of those.
Yeah, I think it is very early. I obviously traveled with the team on their quote unquote 4-year allowable NCAA foreign tour. That seemed to go very smooth. We started the season. Obviously, we had the incident at the football game, and he addressed that with the team. And well, I can't get into the specifics of the discipline. There was discipline actions taken. And then this situation occurred. And as I said, throughout history, we've not ever checked bags. We did do room checks, and we did even take an extra step of posting somebody in the lobby. So I have a hard time. I know so there's in these situations, you're looking maybe for someone to say, hey, we should have all done better in intercollegiate athletics. However, I find it hard pressed that our head coach, Greg Heyer, could have prevented these things. Now, I did speak with the coaching staff at 10 a.m. on Monday, and I did speak with the entire team at 2:45 and reminded everybody of the expectations of oversight of the program, as well as the personal behavior of our student athletes. And I reminded them of their stature in our community and, them having an unbelievably successful program with all the postseason and NCAA accolades in the state of New Mexico. So, I think that both he and I did everything we can to verbally remind the team of what the expectations are going forward.
Maybe a follow-up to that, and maybe you just addressed it, but do you feel that you or someone in administration needs to take a more heavy-handed or active role in the day-to-day operations of that particular team, at least this season?
Well, Jason, for the last several years, every road trip has an administrator on the trip. In this road trip, our CFO, Ed Pizaski, and our faculty athletic rep, Kevin Melendres, happen to be on the trip. So, we do have an extra step of administrative oversight on every men's basketball road trip. And with the proximity of the Pan American Center, I don't think there is a day that goes by that we don't have a conversation with each other, or we're not running over there and seeing the student athletes. So sure, when there's an event of this magnitude, you look at every process and you make sure that you have a direct line. But I think one of the good things about New Mexico State is, I know the student athletes personally. The vast majority of them. So do we need to do a better job? When do we not? But certainly, yeah, as the chancellor said, we're going to look at all our processes and, continually, have dialogue with the student athletes.
I just have one last question for Ms. Goodman, if I can.
Go ahead.
I was wondering if you could talk about what triggers when you become involved in an athletics investigation or situation. And then is there any way that you can say since 2019, how many times have you been involved in investigation with athletes and how many times have you recommended some sort of discipline?
Well, let me start by saying that I don't have those statistics obviously right in front of me. I can think through. We've had a number of cases where we have taken athletes through the student conduct process. I wouldn't even begin to speculate how many that there have been since 2019. I did not bring those statistics. But the triggers that often would call those incidents to our attention would be some sort of an incident report, oftentimes on campus, oftentimes in the residence halls, police reports from on campus, not necessarily off campus, and or reports from other students or other community members. That's what would trigger a process. We do not recommend disciplinary sanctions. We have a process, and sanctions then are assigned if they are responsible for a violation of the student conduct code. Athletic coaches oftentimes have also policies and team expectations, and coaches also have the ability to provide some sort of set of expectations and consequences when those expectations aren't met. But those are at a team level, not necessarily at the university level. So expectations are that when incident reports hit our office, we're looking at it from a student conduct code perspective, and then we'll drill down to what other policies that NMSU has that may have been violated. Does that answer your question, Jason?
Yes, thank you.
Next, we'll go to KRQE.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Annalisa. I'm with KRQE in Albuquerque. Quick two-part question. One is, can you confirm or share how many student athletes or NMSU basketball players were involved in that altercation on October 15th? And then following that, Mario, if you could just elaborate what Mike Peake meant when he said when he told you all the coaches could do or did all they could.
I don't believe we can answer that first question because of the ongoing investigation. Is that correct, Justin? Or
yeah, that is something that's still fluid at this point in time. So I'd rather not disclose how many student athletes may or may not have been involved in that fight.
Yeah, I could answer it, but I guess I can't. As far as the second part, you know, you're talking to a young man that I've known ever since he came here. He came here with a clean slate from Austin Peay University, beginning at Georgia. And he certainly, you know, we had a private discussion about things that I can't disclose, you know, regarding his health. And, you know, Mike's infrastructure is heavily coach centered, you know, from his background and his life. And I really think, you know, I'm sure like he's sitting there and he's looking at everything and reading everything. And the coaches have meant a lot to his life and are important in his life. And he wanted to make sure that they were okay. Obviously, some of the questions are generated to, hey, is the coach still going to be the coach? Is he going to be this? So he's, I'm sure, not immune to hearing that stuff. And of all the things he could have told me, that's the first thing he wanted to say, which, you know, I understand that, you know, there's a lot of people who have strong feelings about Mike, but I think that indicates where his head is at right now, thinking of others.
And then I just have one other follow-up question about guns on campus. And this is just in terms of protocol. Is it something, you know, if we're talking about searching dorm rooms or firearms on campus, is it something where you need a tip first to go search someone's room and discover a firearm, or do you do, you know, regular wellness safety checks where you can do that kind of thing?
I can answer that.
Yeah, go ahead, Ann, please.
So search and seizure laws are in place on a college campus. So a residence hall room is an individual's private space, and they cannot be subjected to unreasonable search and seizure by the police when they're living in on-campus housing. If there is obviously some sort of probable cause, then law enforcement will work with our on-campus residence life staff to do that. Obviously, when you're talking about a health and wellness issue, though, if there is a reason for us to go in and check on somebody to do a wellness check, we also work with our university police to make sure that those are done in an appropriate manner.
Okay, but it's fair to say you need a credible tip first to go.
That would be correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Go ahead, Jeff Grammer.
This first one's kind of just a cleanup of some previous questions. I want to be clear here, since a lot of people on this call are about to go report about discipline. I get from a student standpoint, you guys can't say anything about discipline. You guys have said FERPA prevents you from doing so. We've been told that from a team standpoint, to direct questions to either Mario or to the coach. And I want to be clear, you said everyone's going to Vegas, but you didn't quite say whether or not that means they're being suspended or not. I assume if they're going to Vegas, they're not being suspended, but it's not, we shouldn't assume anything. So is there any suspensions of players that snuck out of their dorm rooms, out of their hotel rooms from last weekend? Just because they're going to Vegas, that doesn't imply that there's not going to be discipline. So I want to clarify the punishment part of what happened this past weekend with at least the other Aggies.
Sure. Historically, Jeff, this is Mario. So historically, punishments for breaking curfew has rested 100% with the coach. Obviously, this is a very atypical situation where some curfew breaking interacted with other things. So I would say that still is going to remain a coach's decision. I can tell you that some discipline to the curfew breakers has been given to those individuals already on campus. And, that's going to be a decision on the coaching staff of if there's any further punishment in your words, game suspension.
Okay, as far as the October 15th incident goes, I'm curious what a university, this is for all of you, what a university's role is when a fight like that, especially one that's on video and a widely circulated video, what an obligation a university has to communicate maybe with other universities. We know now that there was a UTEP, at least a UTEP student or two involved. We know now that a UNM student or two were involved. Did you guys reach out to either other university to either get their help to maybe identify everyone involved, to handle your guys' Dean of Students matter where you were investigating it? Or was there any communication at all about the October 15th incident as we kind of look towards what all these universities could have maybe have done that might have helped along the line to maybe prevent what happened on Saturday?
And maybe do you want to talk a little bit about your communications with your counterparts? And then I think, Chancellor, I think it's important to talk more generally about our expectations with those games.
Sure. I can walk through our process with regards to the football game and some of the incidents that were reported. I want to be clear that video was not something that came to light in our office until I want to say at least 5 or 6 days after that the football game, and it was passed on to us by another student. Our team, our student conduct team, took a look at that and was and are still working with university police to identify who was in that video. Quite frankly, none of my staff could identify anybody in that video. And to be fair, we don't necessarily know all of our student athletes. And so they did not identify anybody immediately. And we had worked and are still working with University Police with regards to that, to investigating that video. Clearly, we did not necessarily think that that video or the fight was particularly significant. Obviously, hindsight is 2020. But that fight was also not even addressed by our police. In that, what I'm saying, it was not one of the individual fights that were reported to our office. There was no record of that fight until that video had even come to light. The police had not provided any kind of names. They had provided no information to our office. So it was strictly a Twitter video that we were trying to investigate, and we were working with our partners in law enforcement. Consequently, we did not share it with our counterparts at UNM, obviously not anybody at UTEP either, because simply we just did not know who was in the video until recently. So we're still trying to collect some of that information, and quite frankly, I'm going to let our law enforcement partners take the lead on that.
Thanks, Anna. Excuse me, I'll say a few additional words on that. You know, I know we have a good relationship with the administrations in both UTEP and UNM. I can speak for all three institutions that we take this level of hostility very seriously, and are trying to do all the things that are necessary to kind of lower the rivalry, if you will, aggressiveness that has begun to really grow. I think I've seen improvements certainly in the relationship that we have with UTEP. And obviously this is indicative maybe of a different set of circumstances that we need to be aware of going forward. But I think there's no question that from the perspective of the administration, we are anxious and we'll take extra steps to ensure that we have, first of all, proper and appropriate security at these events. I think one of the early observations that we're starting to conclude is that we could have done better with having more different kinds of security services than we've had in the past. This is escalating as a consequence of the nature of the challenge. So these kind of things are things that we will pay a lot of attention to, because frankly, we want to have good, healthy relationships with our rivalry institutions, and I believe that's possible. But we now have to be ever more vigilant than before to make sure that our processes are in place, our security is appropriate for the kind of challenges that we're going to see, and there are some things that we can do in just locating where the seats are, and don't put the rivalry students right next to each other. It just doesn't make any sense. And yet I don't think we've thought all of those things through. So we will do a lot more in the future to mitigate the challenges that come with rivalry games, and to manage that in an appropriate fashion.
If I could jump in just to come back to something, we do have a regular communication with the Dean of Students Office at the University of New Mexico, and also with the other schools that we play and work with here in the area. And anytime a student is involved from another school, we have an obligation as a courtesy to let them know about that. So we do that regularly, and they do also.
Thank you, guys. And I want to clarify one thing you said. You did say this video was referred to you, but about 5 or 6 days, you said, after the game itself. But you guys did review this video before this past weekend's incident.
I can confirm that we were looking at it, and we had passed it on to our university police to also be collecting that information.
And Mario, were you aware of that video before this past weekend, or your basketball players' involvement in that video before this past weekend?
Yeah, I can't recall exactly when. Certainly it was that next week. But yes, I was aware. And that's why, discipline was meted out on the individuals that we could identify.
Thank you, guys.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, John Cardinelli, KOAT in Albuquerque. Just have a couple questions today. My first question is the conduct of the coaches after the shooting currently under investigation?
I can't speak for the potential police investigation. However, no, I think we're aware of where all of our coaches were at that time and what they were doing. So I'd say no to that answer. Question.
Perfect. And then my next question is, are you making any changes next trip on how you address curfew? And if so, how do you plan on enforcing it?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, the easy answer is yes. Now, it's all of our hopes. And as a former student athlete, you know what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And when there's a bed check and you're either in your room or not in your room, you've made that decision. I think while, it's not a prison, you can't lock somebody in their room. We will certainly beef up, the understanding of the importance of a good night's sleep, that, leaving your room or the hotel, only bad things can happen, as well as whatever measures to maybe more, we actually have a coach on each floor that the student athletes. So we'll look at the geography of things as well and see what makes sense the most. However, there is not a camera on a door 24/7. So we'll do everything we can that's appropriate to ensure that breaking curfew is eliminated or kept to a minimum, knowing full well that people have been breaking curfew for 70 years, unfortunately.
Now, Mario, earlier you had mentioned, some sort of bag check on these road trips. How do you plan on enforcing a bag check on road trips?
Well, we have spoken with our general counsel. How would you go about doing a bag check? You don't really have an option at the airport, right? So you certainly would get a student athlete's consent to look in their bag. They give it, you look at it, and you put it on the bus. As I said, the vast majority of our trips in basketball are on an airplane, and football. Only the UNM and UTEP series are we not, more or less, are we not getting on an airplane. So that is what we discussed, and we kind of ran it by our general counsel, and we'll put that into effect on our bus trips.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
I'll go ahead and go to Keva next. You had mentioned that you had a follow-up to maybe something that somebody had said earlier.
Right, yes. I'm Kaveh Mofahed from KUNM Radio, and I want to take a step back to talk a little bit more about the rivalry and ideas of culture. You said in October you didn't know that fight was significant. Now, of course, we do know that it was significant. And I guess I'm just wondering, are we ready to say now that the rivalry's gotten out of hand between New Mexico State and UNM? And what sorts of things can universities do to kind of bring the balance back to a more healthy level in the rivalry? How can we affect culture? How can universities affect culture? Are you thinking about this stuff yet, or is it too soon?
No, it's not too soon. We're thinking about it a lot, and in fact, I've been in contact both again with President Stokes and President Wilson. In this case, our two rivalry games. I think we're both committed to recognizing, first of all, that most of our students are compliant and well conducting themselves in ways that we're proud of. There are a number that don't. I think one of the things that we can do, certainly always at football games, it's a concern for us, is alcohol. We have tailgates, and these tailgates, need to be, there needs to be some discipline around how you do that. We have students that sometimes, go to, those that are of age and able to drink, and they do so, but they don't go to the game. They just drink. So there are a number of things that we as an institution can do in terms of managing that student population. I think the main thing is education and getting the student leadership. We have a great, AS NMSU student leadership, group that I think would be very anxious to work with our Greeks and all the other, units of student organizations across the entire campus to really do the things that we do. We're trying to keep our campus safe. If you see something, say something. Those kinds of initiatives have been extremely helpful to us in terms of campus safety and in terms of making sure that, we have the proper approach to diversity and inclusion and making sure that we're not essentially ostracizing a certain population of our students. So the student involvement, I think, will be key to helping us build that. And I think cross-university relationships, which we already have a number of, can be strengthened in ways where there's more collaboration and a little bit less conflict. So I think rivalries are not necessarily unhealthy. They sometimes are very healthy. We've lost focus on, first of all, the challenges of our society are so great. We need to acknowledge that and understand that our campuses are not immune to all of those challenges. The dysfunction that comes from society shows up on our campus in different ways, and we just need to manage it. So it's a challenge for us, and I know we've got a good group of administrators. We are focused on student success. We are focused on how do we help our students and our student athletes be better at what they do. And that means building character and integrity and collaboration, as well as the education that they're getting. And most of our student athletes are wonderful ambassadors for the institution. And so I don't want to lose sight of what the positive is while we take on what I think are significant challenges in making sure that we manage what ultimately is an emerging and more serious challenge of how we manage our demographics, and especially our students and the new generation that's coming up. So hopefully that helps a little bit in terms of how we think about it. But I know it's something that both all of our institutions are focused on.
Dave, I was going to chime in just from the athletic standpoint. I have a unique perspective where I have a degree from each institution, and I've worked in each institution's athletic department. And I know a lot of the boosters and individuals in Albuquerque. So I do think the boss mentioned two big ones, fan proximity. We are very blessed here that we offer a great college experience. And with that comes a lot of interest in the students attending our games, football, men's basketball, et cetera. I think making sure there's a good buffer in these games are critical. We do have experience because we have 4 of these. We play UNM twice and we play UTEP. A lot of schools only have maybe the one traditional rival. The alcohol thing is certainly, I know everybody's going to take a look at that. And then, I think the rhetoric, I don't really see a whole lot of, I'd label it trash talk between the teams prior to, or certainly the administrators or the coaches. So that might be third, but just maybe some in-game messaging that we can do, with our fan base. I know a lot of times, like at the football game, we recognize both schools and their, via the spaceport and the space program. So we've done things where we play UTEP. They had to deal with the blood drive of both communities. So we'll probably look at doing more things on the field and on the court to show the unification of the schools, as opposed to, trying to beat each other's brains out on the court or on the field or in the pool or what have you.
If I could jump in also, I think one of the things, Keva, I want to talk about is when I said that the fight wasn't necessarily significant, it wasn't. What I meant by that was it was not addressed by the police at that time. There was no case number, there was no arrests, there was nothing to that degree. And so we did not know about it on the front end. But I also want to go back to the rivalry question. And I think the other is football and large athletic events and alcohol often provide lots of opportunities for poor decisions to be made. And if I go back and I look at the pass back of information from law enforcement and our fire department, our EMS services. A small portion of those individuals that were treated or addressed were students. There were a number of individuals that were not associated with NMSU or UNM from a student perspective, or even a faculty staff perspective, that were involved in altercations or were involved in some sort of a law enforcement activity. And so I think that it when you go back to the concept of the rivalry, these rivalries exist at colleges all across the country. I came from a very large SEC school that had a number of rivalries that every game was very heated. But the fans, I think, are doing a great job of supporting their schools. How we can make that a productive and positive rivalry is certainly something that we should look at. Our students really, honestly, they are looking at that, and ASNMSU had reached out to its counterpart at UNM and similarly. So I think we are talking about that. Back to the fight, or any of the fights, oftentimes the motivation is not based on the rivalry. So in this particular case, I don't know that we know what the motivation for the fight was. Was it a rivalry issue, or could it have been something else? So anytime we talk about this, I think we have to keep in mind all of the incidents, all the facts of the matter.
Thanks, Ann. Let's go to Colin now. Thank you.
Yeah, Colin Deaver again with KTSM TV in El Paso. For any of the three of you, obviously the fight happens October 15th. Mike brings his gun with him from Las Cruces to Albuquerque. Has there been any indication from Mike that that was because of the fights in Albuquerque? Or, I mean, did he bring the gun with him just because he forgot he had it? Did he mean to bring? I mean, I'm just trying to get some clarification on as to why the gun was on the bus to begin with.
I think that's a question that nobody on the screen would be able to answer for you, Colin. I think only Mike would know the answer to that question, or maybe it would come through law enforcement. I'm not sure anybody has that answer. Okay.
And then another question for Mario, just to follow up a little bit. I mean, again, I know you guys have said you'll be taking some more steps in terms of some security, quote unquote, measures on road trips or anything. Are you, as the athletic director, are you going to be stepping in and having maybe more of a heavy hand with the men's basketball program this year because of what's happened?
Well, look, Colin, I mean, we have 16 sports. They all have their own rules. The overarching umbrella is the University Code of Conduct, right? As far as a heavy hand, when I met with our team, I told them what they probably already know, that given the circumstances, the ice that they're standing on is so thin they can see the water below. There's not a room for error, maybe as there have been in the past. And, when you have 400 young people, they're invariably going to have something. It's very rare to go through a whole year with 400 young people and not one infraction occur. But I did just let them know that, that insurance policy that all the student athletes have has been significantly eroded, and they need to take extra measures to be socially responsible. And that includes somebody they don't know coming up in their face and calling their mother a name. I said, you must walk away. You don't have the ability any longer to have the reaction. Now I can preach that. And then there's, things that, hopefully don't occur. But sure, I mean, the message has been delivered. However, what I can't control is the outside forces that these guys may be encountering. But from our athletic program, you can take it to the bank. The message has been delivered.
Lucas, go ahead.
Hello, this is Lucas Spearman from the Las Cruces Sun News. A couple of questions here. I wanted to talk a little bit about the fan experience. I think some people see something like this and they wonder, well, what's the experience going to be like at rivalry games? We know what it has been. Moving forward, we talked about the geography of the fans at various games. The messaging that you might hear. I wanted to get clarification on the involvement of alcohol at games, maybe at rivalry games or at just the games in general. Has there been discussions about removing that from the equation at games?
I'm not sure that exact discussion has been had, Lucas, but maybe the chancellor wants to maybe underline some of his expectations with fan experience.
Yeah, we've had a number of discussions. We've got a foundation and an alumni association that are very anxious to make sure that we get a good fan experience, especially for our alums and for the community at large. Responsible drinking at our institutional events has, I think, for the most part, been managed well in the past. There's clearly areas where we can improve, and I worry most about the tailgates part of football. But there's we've got alcohol on campus. We've got Pete's Patio and a variety of other things. We try to preach a lot of responsibility, as Mario has said, to all of our students. And try to model that behavior as much as we can, through faculty and administration. Now that said, I think what we want to do is always be attentive to what challenges are we seeing that are new, and how do we address those. We will work closely with the dean of students and athletics in particular. Many of these events are done with partners, Learfield and Sodexo and others who provide the services that we ask for, and so it's a multi-stakeholder sort of activity that we're all about every time we have an event. So yeah, we have had conversations about what are the remedies for some of the challenges that we face, and alcohol use has been one of those discussions. At present, I think we've struck a balance that we feel is appropriate for the kind of experiences that we're trying to have, but we will continue to evaluate, and if changes are necessary, we'll do that. We're not bashful about that.
Lucas, I was just going to also say, we have these game operations meetings, and when the first football game that actually served alcohol took place in 2015, about 9 months after I started, and Stephen Lopez was our chief of police, and when we had that UTEP game, he was amazed the lack of arrests that took place. And, at the time we all thought, hey, there's no need to slam your whatever beer out there and then come into the game. Now you can leisurely have a beverage and still have one at the game. I do think this was a little bit of a perfect storm. If you know that we had not played UNM in 4 years, that was pandemic driven, and when we couldn't play in the state, et cetera. So there was a buildup for this game that had not taken place. Usually it takes place every other year, but it was 4 years since the Lobos were last in town. And certainly you had a new coach who has the community pretty fired up for football that, certainly hasn't always existed. So, I'm not going to proclaim a perfect storm, but there was a lot of factors, I think, that led up to the extra excitement around this game.
All right. A second question about the game experience here. Has there been any discussions about disarming Pistol Pete? Certainly the mascot for athletics has firearms at his side, and one of the student athletes of NMSU is in a position here where, fired his own firearm at another student. And have there been any discussions about Pistol Pete moving forward?
I'll answer that question. There's a continual discussion about Pistol Pete and our logos and our mascot and a variety of things that characterize our institution. As you are aware, if you followed Aggie, events at all, there's been a number of overtures to make changes. That is typically met with resistance because there's not agreement among our community as to what this ought to look like. Our alums have a very strong position on some of these things, as do our current students and our current faculty. So it is a conversation and discussion that is ongoing. It continues. It doesn't go away. Obviously events like the one of last week, draw special attention to it. So we'll continue to do that. At this point, no intent or other things that suggest that we're going to make this a top priority. It is something that we have in the background as always, something to be aware of and looking at quite seriously. It isn't also something that relates to the image of the institution. What do we as an institution want to look like? What do we want to advance as our values, as our attitudes, and who we want to be known as? And so those are all part of that conversation, and it will continue to be so. I think it needs to be taken in its totality, and I think overall we will continue to monitor and again as conditions warrant, we'll make the necessary changes. But yes, thank you for the question. It is on our radar.
Thanks, Lucas. Go ahead, Jason.
Hey, can you guys just check her in? She's out here.
We've talked about UNM students involved in that fight. Obviously, Mike Peake at least was involved in that fight. I'm wondering if before they went to this Albuquerque trip specifically, do you know or can you say if anyone spoke to him or any other players that were involved in that particular incident before they went
if they
to
have
Albuquerque
tried to check me in, I'm not hearing it. So let me just hold on one second. It's
I could only speculate
try now.
if basketball had a conversation with him, and I would speculate.
Hey, now
no.
I got you. Yes, I do.
Nor did I. I think that kind of goes back to something that Dr. Goodman
1, 2, 3,
said.
4, 5, 6,
we do
7,
not
8, 9,
know
10.
what precipitated
1, 2.
that altercation at the football game. So yeah, hindsight's 2020, but I did not have a conversation with them about
this part
specifically going to
245.
Albuquerque.
Yeah.
And this is for the Chancellor and Mario.
Sorry, back from break and then what
you
now?
both have talked about the success of the basketball program. Does this diminish, what would you say to folks out who aren't diehard fans of the program? Maybe that this has diminished their thoughts of that program,
yet. I was trying to,
or do you still think of, or have you determined that this is an isolated incident?
Mario, I'll start. I think the main thing I want to say here is I can't give you a definitive, is it an isolated incident? I certainly hope that it is, but that doesn't, hope is not necessarily the watchword here. I think we recognize that the challenges that our students face, and many of them come from different walks of life that are extremely challenging, need to be addressed on our campus, and we have a protocol, and we're going to follow those protocols to make sure that we have a safe and secure and sustainable learning environment, which is primary objective for higher education. That said, we will continue to be very, very vigilant in understanding where it is that we can take actions that will ultimately give us the environment that we're looking for. There's no playbook in this area, and again, many of the social ills that we experience in all of our walks of life show up in some way. They manifest their way on campus, and we need to manage that. So it's not it's not something that we're taking lightly. It's something we're taking very, very, I think we're focused and very intentional about what we need to do. But the real question has to do with, we cannot prevent, violence necessarily, in every circumstance, under every type of condition. We can do a lot to protect our environment and ensuring that we minimize the risk. And that's the main thing that we're going to do is do that on a regular basis. And so that means a lot of things in terms of how we view the institution. Mario, you want to take it from there?
Yeah, Jason, if I clarify your question, do we think it's an isolated incident, and what do we think it's done harm to the basketball program?
Yes.
Yeah, well, as the chancellor said, I sure hope so. We have certainly reminded everybody about their expectations as a student athlete from a behavioral standpoint, and always remind them of the numerous amount of eyeballs that are on them, fair or unfair. That's the way it is. And they have to acknowledge that and accept it. But, you know, in addition to all the kids that have come through here, all the young men, you know, I just penned some down: Trev Queen, Zach Lofton, Teddy Allen, AJ Harris, Jamario Jones, you know, unbelievably successful Aggies that came from other places. They all got their degrees. They all got to chant or are still playing professional basketball. So we've had so many success stories. Even people said, oh, you know, this kid is tough to get along with. Well, those kids have thrived here. They've graduated. They've become popular members of the community, you know, and the fan base, and they've gotten their degree, you know. So I really hope, I don't get to make this decision, but I hope the people who render judgment will remember the myriad of student athletes that have come through here and been very, very successful. And like I said, not take one instance and ascribe that to the entire team. Because at the end of the day, these are young people and they make mistakes, and some are much more catastrophic than others. But, you know, they are individual mistakes.
Thanks.
I think that's going to be the last question for today. Wanted to make sure that we thanked everybody working with Mario's team to get this recorded, and we'll get it posted. And anybody who would like a copy of the recording, just let me know and we'll get it to you. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Recording stopped.